Our plenary speaker tonight actually really doesn't require an introduction. And that's mainly because without him and some of the decisions that he and Chris Maurin made over 25 years ago, think about it, none of us would be here this evening. I wouldn't have a job, for one thing. I'm speaking, of course, of Acton's president and co-founder, Father Robert Sirico. Now, most of you, I suspect, know Father Sirico from his speaking and writing in the United States and around the world. What I suspect most of you don't know is that he is also a full-time parish priest. He's the pastor of a very active, very dynamic parish located not very far from here. And I think it's fair to say that it's a parish that has been radically transformed over the past number of years into the very model of what you want a faithful church to look like, a faithful church that nonetheless is actively engaged in the world. So, amidst his many Acton responsibilities, Father Sirico works pretty much every day in his parish, saying Mass, hearing confessions, working with a wonderful classical school that he and a number of others have revitalized. He's visiting the sick. He's presiding at baptisms, weddings, funerals. He's counseling and consoling the troubled and helping those who are on society's margins. That's basically invisible, as far as I can tell, to most of the people that he encounters around the world. And I'm told it also goes the other way. There are people in his parish who have no idea that he's the president of a think tank whose reach, as you can see from looking around tonight, is truly global. But if you ask Father Sirico who he is, I guarantee he won't say, I'm a speaker, I'm a thinker, I'm a writer, I'm a think tank president, etc. He'll simply say, I'm a priest of Jesus Christ and his church. Ladies and gentlemen, Father Robert Sirico.
Thank you, Sam. I dread to think about your occupation had we not founded the Acton Institute. You would be dwelling in that purgatory we call academia. Oh, I correct myself, that hell we call academia. The first thing I want to do is, and Chris said to me, he's already gone to a board meeting that we have to attend over the weekend in Canada. He said, you know what, I forgot to do. How could I have forgotten this? And that is to thank the staff of the Acton Institute. Let me tell you something. Wait a minute. And I gotta lay it on here because I guess I really don't have to lay it on because you've all encountered them. You've been in touch with them for months already. You've met them at the table. We've got this incredible group of people who make this all look very easy, who have been working long before you got here and long after you've gone to sleep, who have made preparations for every bottle of water and every notepad and all of the various things that go into making this conference as seamless as it's been. And it is such an honor for me to work with these people who make me and Chris look so good and make your lives so much easier. Please say thank you to the staff of the Acton Institute. I have great news for you tonight. We have hit the lottery. The biggest lottery in history. We hit it. And I'm going to show you the ticket. We have the ticket coming up on the screen. Well, now we have a few less people on the staff of the Acton Institute. This is the winning lotto ticket that you and I have hit. I don't care where you're from. We hit this. Let me tell you what this is. This is 2,000 years of human history. So, what you are looking at is roughly from the time of that recent unpleasantness, the eruption of Vesuvius in my family's neighborhood in Pompeii, to the present. What you're looking at, that straight line, that's not a border. That's the line of human income, human accessibility to cash and all the things that cash gets you. Roughly that much every year, roughly every year for all those years. And by the way, if we went back to Adam and Eve, it would come out roughly to the same. Now, there are a few exceptions, a few people here and there who robbed others or who conquered, planets or nations and stuff like that. Well, maybe there were Mormons here, who knows? And they conquered some planets. But whatever, those would be exceptions. The norm was that for all of human history. And then all of a sudden, something started to percolate. And that was the drawing of the lottery balls. Boop, 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 whatever they do. And you see roughly 300 years ago, this hockey stick comes into formation to the point, and if you look right at the top of that hockey stick, that's us. And the poorest nation represented here is still up there. Think about that for just a moment. And that's relatively recent in human history, right? As you can see. Whew. It goes up. And what you need to understand, other than just the representation by money, above $100 trillion, is what that represents in virtually every demographic consideration. What this puts out in a monetary snapshot affects not just income rates, but also the distribution of income. So that the very well-known phrase, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, is only half true. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting richer. And that's just true. They hit the lotto too. It also represents the capacity of people, as you have just experienced, for having access to caloric intake and potable water and health care. I mean, we don't even think of this anymore. There are probably 2 or 3 defibrillators on this floor. Defibrillators on this floor if somebody were, God forbid, to have a heart attack. In terms of health care, in terms of shelter, in terms of clothing, and concomitant with all of that is the decrease in child mortality rates, birth rates going up because children are living longer and surviving childbirth. There are discrepancies from one nation to another, even one race to another. But overall, even within those categories, the numbers have gone up. An increase in longevity. And that hockey stick only just represents a whole series of concrete impacts on human physical well-being. I could go on. All of that are the footnotes to the lottery ticket of which I'm speaking. Now, there's another fact about lottery winners that I suspect many of you are aware. Maybe, I don't know, anybody here has won a lottery ticket. Of course, you've got to play it if you're going to win it. So that leaves out the Baptists. I knew a Baptist who used to have his Catholic secretary go buy his lottery tickets. Somehow. I guess that's remote cooperation with evil, indirect remote cooperation. But here's the other fact about lottery winners, and that is that 70% of them, whether they've won $100 million or $500 million, think of this, 70% of them have lost it all within 5 years. How do you lose $500 million in 5 years? I'll tell you how. Because most of the people who have played the lottery, which are most of the people who have won the lottery, right? Just math, don't know how that wealth was produced in the first place. And by the way, they just obtained it by chance. So there's no reason that they would have, it's not like they worked and knew how to make, and that's the point. Indications exist that we may lose the lottery winnings we have won precisely for the same reason. Not because we've won this ticket by chance, because this ticket was not won by chance. It was won by a variety of things. This great, unprecedented explosion of wealth on this planet is not understood. In a very broad cultural, historic, philosophical, theological, cultural sense, this is not yet grasped. And it's understandable when you look at the range of history and how acclimated we've become to this, the way we think about it. Unlike a game of chance, what you saw on that graph did not happen by accident. It happened by a set of precedents. And to a very great extent, those precedents are complex and sometimes coincidental, sometimes geographic that contributed to it, sometimes just because of a set of presumptions, sometimes fought for at great expense and with great heroism. That upward graph represents a complex set of factors. And as I say, like 70% of a typical lotto winner, we see indications that the goods of this great and unprecedented winning ticket are under threat. That this astounding situation is not well understood. What produced that hockey stick is not well understood in our society. Recent polls indicate, you may be aware of it, and I'm not going to bore you with a lot of polls, and I'm going to pick on millennials because it's the thing all speakers have to do, at least at one point in their speech this year, right? But it's that millennials admire systems of socialism. It accounts for a lot of the Bernie Sanders supporters. It accounts, and not just Bernie Sanders supporters, these same kind of trend lines among Trump supporters about economics, the pessimism for the future, all of these kinds of things. People admire systems with strong central leaders. They admire systems with strong central planning. These polls indicate that they're skeptical, if not downright opposed, to that phrase from Adam Smith that Dr. Elzinga reminded us of last night, that obvious and simple system of natural liberty, that they're opposed to that. For some, such a system is too simple and unnatural. For some, human social cooperation is seen as an impossibility without coercion. That if you're going to get human beings to cooperate with each other in a productive way, they have to be forced to do it. For some, the quest for justice, which demands to each his due, somehow becomes confused and exchanged for envy, which is to each the same, not to each his due. Beware, my friends, that envy very often wears the mask of justice. Many such confusions exist in our societies today and in our academic institutions, and unfortunately within our churches. Now, let me just identify just a few, because we could be here a long time with this, but I just want to identify a few principal points which I hope in the course of the 130 courses that you've followed during this week, I hope you've heard addressed in various ways. My job is to kind of sum things up and issue a kind of call tonight. But one of them is that prosperity somehow is only achieved at the expense of others. This is what we call the zero-sum game. The pie is limited. The moral question when you face a pie that has maldistribution, where some have a lot and some have a little, the moral solution to that is to divide up the pie, not to grow the pie, which would benefit everyone. And that the zero-sum mentality says that in an exchange, somebody wins and somebody loses. That is really the core of the socialist idea. That there are winners only because there are losers, that somehow they've taken it away. You know, you could look at that set of winners that are on the end of that hockey stick and ask yourself the question, well, where did it get redistributed from? Go back 2,000 years, it wasn't. It didn't exist. So you see the fallacy of the zero-sum game. And yet, how many people do you talk to who just assume that that's the case, that that's reality? Another thing is that freedom is enough, that the solution to all the problems of the world is just to free people, just destroy institutions, destroy norms, question authority. Don't ever drive behind a car that has that bumper sticker. Keep your distance from that car. If they take it seriously, anything could happen. I mean, just think about that, by the way. Do you stay in your lane? This is not in reference to any of you Italians or Nigerians in the office, in the room. Do you stay in your lane because there's a law that says to stay in your lane? When you're on a freeway going 70 miles an hour, I suspect you stay in your lane because you don't want to hit the car that's coming toward you, primarily. I'm not saying there shouldn't be traffic laws, but the primary motivation is not to get in accidents. No, my friends, freedom is not enough. Just the thought that liberty is a vacuum is to some people a new concept. I was speaking a number of years ago to somebody who said to me, he's an atheist, but he's a great believer in freedom, in liberty. And when I was telling him about, this is quite a few years ago, as you can tell by this story, when I was telling him about the idea of starting the Acton Institute, he said, well, I don't believe in religion at all. He's a Randroid, and a disciple of Ayn Rand. He said, but I'll tell you what, I believe in liberty more than I believe in the truth. So I don't care about your fictional God. Now think about that. The assumption is that liberty is something, is some virtue. It's not. It's a vacuum. It's a potential. It's something you have to put liberty for. What? Liberty going where? To do what? And if it isn't the truth, then I don't want to drive behind your car either. No, liberty is not enough. Order is important. And it is true that liberty is the mother, not the daughter, of order. Liberty is the mother, not the daughter, of order. So all of the strongman temptations, the populist temptations, the fascistic temptations, the big government temptations, especially in the moment of crisis that says we have to draw it all together. We need a dictator just for a short period of time in order to impose order, is a deadly mistake. Liberty is the mother of order because human cooperation does not require coercion. The free and the virtuous society, that's a phrase you've heard over and over again in these last few days. And if you look at it, a lot of Acton's literature, a lot of Acton's materials use this kind of, it sets these tensions up or these poles, right? The free and virtuous society, religion and liberty, truth and liberty, liberty oriented to the truth, freedom to do what you ought to do. All of these tensions really speak to the vacuum of truth, of freedom, and the necessary tension that guides our efforts. Another one of these tendencies, these attitudes that we see, especially among religious leaders nowadays, is a temptation toward integralism. Now, that's probably the Catholic version of it. The Protestant version of it is called theonomy. The Muslim version of it is called Sharia law. Whatever you want to call it, it's the notion of theocracy. The notion is that we can impose. It's what the judge said the other night. We can impose upon you for your own good, for your spiritual good, something that a conclusion to which, a course of action to which you have not yet come. And these tendencies toward this fail to see the way in which private ownership provide the sphere of human diversity and exchange, how exchange itself breaks down class and racial divisions. The people who want to sell people to things to other people tend to deprioritize the ethnicity of the person they're selling something to in order to be able to make the deal. And it brings people into a form of cooperation. Is it an ideal form of cooperation? Is it kissy-kissy? Is it wonderful brotherhood yet? No, not yet. But it's the beginning of it. It's the novitiate of a community when people can at least exchange goods. To safeguard religious liberty, we need private property. It's all fine and good to say you can have, your own religion, your belief expression. But if you don't have the right to build a church or found a social service organization whereby you can commend others to your own belief system, it doesn't do you very much good. If the licensing system, the apparatus of law, prevents an adoption agency from adopting two people who share a certain set of beliefs or bake cakes for a certain set of people on any side of the question, because I'm not in favor of forcing gay bakeries to sell wedding cakes to heterosexual couples. I think it's got to work all ways. Private property, exchange, enterprise produces an authentic form of diversity and an authentic form of class and ethnic and racial encounter, naturally. And it shows that human cooperation is vital and need not be coerced. And then one of the other things that's associated with this is this vilification of business people, this demonization of the entrepreneur in particular. Anyone who's ever successful, you don't have to make any other argument against the moral character of a person in this present culture than to say they're rich. If you've said they're rich, they're damned. You don't have to say anything more about them. Because, of course, sin came into existence with wealth. Didn't exist before. Why is this so? Well, there was a dialogue that I witnessed once a number of years ago. It was between a French cardinal of the Roman Catholic Church and one of the greatest industrialists that France has ever produced, François Michelin. And they were having this conversation about workers. The cardinal was summarizing some papal documents on work and stuff. And Monsieur Michelin said, "Yes, Your Eminence, but I am a worker." And the cardinal looked at him skeptically. And he told the story. He said, I was talking with someone who was protesting one of our plants once. He was a Marxist, and he was protesting. And Monsieur Michelin went to the protest line, if you can imagine this, and engaged this man in a conversation. And he said to the man, he said, "I said to him what I just said to you, Your Eminence. I am a worker." And the protester said, "No, you are not a worker. You are a boss." And he said, "Well, what's the difference between a boss and a worker?" He said, "The worker takes orders. The boss does not take orders." And Monsieur Michelin said to him, "What defines the shape of the plowshare? The will of the farmer or the nature of the terrain?" The terrain gives the order to the farmer as to how he is to make the plowshare. The consumer gives the order to the entrepreneur as to what is to be produced, how much it is to cost, even what color it should be, and how it should be packaged, and the best way to sell it. No, the entrepreneur is a servant. In a free society, the entrepreneur must serve if the entrepreneur is going to succeed. Another one of these notions that are very dangerous and yet prevalent is the notion of the gaps I alluded to it at the beginning, didn't I, when I said, the rich and the poor, some people, if you get into the discussion, they say, well, there's this great gap. Even if the poor are getting relatively wealthier, and by the way, they're getting wealthier in the same proportion as the rich. It's just that 20% on the part of a very rich person is a lot of money, and 20% on the part of a poor person is not as much. But it sure feels like a lot when it's 20% more of what you had before, proportionally. And so the preoccupation, the moral preoccupation, is very often the gap between the rich and the poor. I very often said, I really don't think that's the moral question. I don't care how much more Bill Gates has than who? Give me a name. It doesn't matter. The question is how he got it. And if he got it by serving, that is, giving to people what they are demanding of him, then I don't care if Warren Buffett doesn't have quite as much as Bill Gates. That's not the moral concern. The moral concern is the poor. The moral concern is the floor, not the gap, and not the ceiling. Now, it is true that sometimes others will have before other people. I didn't have the first video cassette player in my neighborhood. I had to wait years to get that. And even now, I don't have one. The upward movement of prosperity that we saw in that graph meant that some people were moving ahead faster than others, but that didn't mean that those who were lagging behind were doing worse. If I want to put this on a bumper sticker, I would simply say that today's luxuries are tomorrow's household items. And you and I, no matter what country you come from, know that to be the truth. I give you the cell phone as an example. These temptations, these things that need clarification, really, in the realist meaning of it, are not merely the temptations and seductions that millennials confront. After all, the promoter of the state as the object of our devotion is nothing new. It is as ancient as the Caesars of Rome, as the pharaohs of Egypt, as the shoguns of Japan. The temptation to power and its corrupting potential are perennial. They rest in the human heart. They go back to Cain and Abel. We have gathered here this week because we must challenge these assumptions, whether it is in the form of the bureaucratic state or in the form of crony capitalism. We need to stand up against that, not because this is a political fight, but as Maria Corena said, it is an existential fight. Indeed, it is a moral fight. Indeed, it is an anthropological fight. Winning the lottery does not usher in utopia. There is a challenge before us, but it is not the same challenge that all of those people 300 years or so back to Vesuvius and back to Eden faced. Their challenge, Jonah Goldberg makes this point in his new book, The Suicide of the West, their challenge, the challenge of the human race for the vast majority of its existence on this planet, was a challenge of survival. We still think that it's a challenge of survival. All of the people who have also hit this lottery ticket don't sound like people who've just hit a lottery ticket. They're not worrying about how to invest. They're not worrying about how to safeguard it, how to preserve it. They're worrying still about survival. The challenge that we face today is not a challenge of survival, but a challenge of abundance. And this is a real moral challenge. And this is a moral challenge that can only be adequately confronted when we understand a proper anthropology. This is a serious challenge, a deep challenge, and I would say even a more threatening challenge, if for no other reason that there are more of us on the planet than there were 300 years back to Eden previously. So there are more lives at stake. But it is a challenge to understand the morality of the situation and the anthropology of the people who are engaged. It is a change in anthropological understanding. How do we confront living in the context of abundance? We can survive, but how can we thrive? How can we become more than human doings? How can we retain our identity as human beings? Each person is unique, unrepeatable, and in each person there is this facet of the divine that we can only perceive by attending to the dignity of every person we encounter. That is to say, that in order to encounter the truth that will lead us to the conclusion of what to do with our liberty, we need to attend to the person who's in front of us, because they contain a truth revealed through the Imago Dei that no other human being possesses, a part of that truth that can benefit not just them, but us as well. I've quoted so many times over the years the insight of C.S. Lewis. You've never met a mere mortal. Everyone you've ever come in contact with, everyone you've ever hated and who has ever served you, is either an everlasting splendor or an immortal horror, but you've never met a mere mortal. The most sacred thing, Lewis said, that presents itself to our senses next to the Blessed Sacrament is our neighbor. That's why everything we've done here this week has this anthropological backdrop to it. It is human beings who work, human beings who engage the material world, human beings who produce and create, human beings who build society, human beings who care for other human beings because of the solidarity of recognizing that they too are made in the image and likeness of God. You will go back to your communities over which you have great influence. We know that because we asked you a whole series of questions before you ever came here. We know that each of you has about 3,000 people that you have influence with. You can build those communities. You can build this understanding. You can defend the free society, clarify the imperative of virtue. The great visitor to these shores in the early part of the 1800s, Alexis de Tocqueville, made this observation. Despotism may govern without faith, but liberty cannot. How is it possible that society should escape so great a destruction if the moral tie is not strengthened in proportion as the political tie is relaxed. I advocate the relaxation of the political tie at the same time that I advocate the strengthening of the moral tie. And then Tocqueville said this, and what can be done with a people who are their own masters if they are not subservient to the deity? My friends, take this message with you as you leave here. Amplify this message. Build your networks of influence, because this is the way to build the free and the virtuous society. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Father. That was great. There was a line you used in your remarks. You talked about justice often being a mask, claims of justice being a mask for envy. And one thing, some people have heard me say this already, I have never heard a sermon or a homily from any priest or any pastor that's talked about envy. Why are religious leaders so reluctant to talk about this, particularly in the Judeo-Christian tradition where envy is one of the big no-nos in the Ten Commandments? Why won't they talk about this?
Well, that's because you don't come to my parish, Sam. I'll send you envelopes in the morning. No, I mean, I mean, they'll talk about envy like, you know, in a kind of superficial sort of way. But it's one of those things that can be masked so easily. And that's what I was trying to point out. In the way we say, it's kind of like, you know, the person who calls another person, and pardon me for being stereotypical, but the first time I heard this story, it was a woman calling another woman, and she said, now I'm just calling you to pray with you for Mary Lou, because you know, and then began to fill in all of the details of Mary Lou's faults and failings. But this is just to pray, not to gossip. You know, and this is the way we mask envy. And I think it's uncomfortable. And anytime preachers don't preach on things, it's either because the preacher, him or herself, is not well formed, or, and if I was to give the best interpretation of this, it's because they don't want to hurt anybody. You know, you stand up there, I hear confessions of people, and then I need to preach on topics that I may have just heard in the confessional. And you may think, oh, I don't want to kind of drive that point home and stuff, but the assumption of that, the mistake of that, is that truth is somehow not pastoral, that somehow the truth isn't loving. Of course, it depends on your tone. You can be very unloving in telling the truth to people.
Why are you looking at me that way?
Because you need to hear it, Sam. So I think that's true. And I also think that perhaps the reluctance to preach on envy is because when you begin to speak about it and think about it for a little bit, you see that the entire ideology of socialism is predicated on it. That's the moral imperative of socialism. It's envy. Class struggle.
Just to switch topics a little bit, you mentioned integralism, which has occupied the attention of a lot of people at Acton. You have participated in some very public debates about this subject with various representatives of this position. What do you think is driving this move towards integralism? For those of you who don't know, it's a sort of blending of religion and state so that the two become not indistinguishable, but very, very closely interrelated. It's a sort of type of arrangements that existed in some parts of the medieval world. What do you think is driving? But you mentioned millennials. A lot of millennials seem very taken by this, not just in the Catholic world, but increasingly with some evangelicals, some Eastern Orthodox Christians. What do you think is really behind this?
I think there are any variety of things. Of course, it depends on the particular person and what would be animating them. But in the broadest sense, it's that Cain and Abel dynamic. It's that the tendency toward power over other people. Also, it can just be, I want to do the good, and this is really the simplest way to do it. Just force people to do it. By golly, you just be good. And that could be part of it. I think part of it is that if we're looking at it in the millennial context, it might have to do with the fact that a lot of millennials didn't experience in any real way socialism. They didn't see the Berlin Wall. They didn't experience, Sam, this will come as a shock to you, but some of the people in this room weren't alive when the towers collapsed.
Oh. I'm increasingly aware of that, unfortunately.
So my hope, though, I was speaking to the group of presidents of colleges, and we had a bit of this discussion today. I didn't see World War II. I didn't see Nazism. But I met a woman who had tattoos on her arm. Mrs. Schneider, who went through it. And so that put me in touch with that. And so I think what we have to do as an institute is put people in touch with the reality of that experience. And those of you who are, this is why I think it's so important what you have to give us, you who are living under this in Venezuela and other countries. You have to tell us what this is. You have to tell others what this is so they understand what it is to live in a society that is integralist. Because be assured that the Sandinistas and the Chavistas of Nicaragua or Venezuela really see themselves as doing God's work, and so I think there's a lot of that. Then there's just some dilettantism. I have this sense of snarkiness and easy dismissal, logical confusions that if Ireland allows for abortion, it's because Ireland liberalized its economic system. And it's just a jump that...
It's curious, the explanations are very economistic. Have you noticed that?
Yes, they are. Say a little bit more about that, because that's really important.
Well, this is your interview, but all I was going to say was that by economistic, I mean that when you look at many of the explanations they have, for example, what happened in Ireland, well, it's democracy and capitalism. And I thought,
it's moral corrosion.
Yeah, it's the confession. It's a long history of the confessional state, which bred a lot of resentment against the church, etc., etc. It was got nothing to do with.
And the confessional state is another form of this integralism, which is liberation theology, which is theonomy, which is Sharia law. And we have some Muslim scholars here who may say, yes, but let's make that distinction. Okay, let's make the right distinctions, but let's renounce this notion that clerics, regardless of their faith profession, should be the executors of the law in civil society.
Let's turn to a few questions that we're getting through on Slido. The first question which came up, which you've talked about a little bit, but maybe this is a chance for you to expand on it. What do you see as the future of Acton University? We bring together people from all around the world, 81 countries, 1,100 people, whatever it is. It's pretty amazing when you think about it. Where do you see Acton University going, and how does that play into that future, play into the future of the Acton Institute?
Well, I think part of the answer to that will be in the surveys that you all are going to get, or have you gotten. I hope you've gotten. I hope you take them seriously. If you fill them out just to get your T-shirt, then go back and fill them out again and really think about it, because we take them seriously. We will spend 2 weeks analyzing the points you take. Tell us what you need.
What I'll tell you right now is, of course, that it's grown over the last 13 years, and we're at a point where if we make any other physical growth, it's going to require a whole load of logistical planning. So we're not sure that the best way to go is just keep this growing. We could have had twice the amount of people here tonight based on those who applied. So we want to make it sustainable. Part of the way we're doing that, this is somewhat more subtle, but is our alumni association. That's going to amplify the effect of what Acton University does. Our alumni association will have pockets of people meeting all over the world, passing on this information. We will supply various materials and the like. Also, the technological part of this, Michael Miller is hard at work with producing these short, easily deliverable, easily accessible facets of what we're saying morally, economically here at Acton, various parts of it, and it's just begun. Keep your eye on that whole good society unfolding that's going to come. That's tied to Acton University, the ideas of Acton University, and we hope that's a way of doing it. I mean, we can stream it. We have the MP3s. Is that what they're called?
I believe so. I'm technologically worse than you.
We're all in favor of technology. We just don't use it. I was afraid when Sam pulled out his phone, he was going to pick up this big thing and put it to his ear. So that's going to be part of it. It's not inconceivable that we could do a winter university somewhere. I have been pushing our staff and met with blank stares to see if we could incorporate families somehow in Acton University. I think it'd be great to get the next generation. I know a lot of you, I've met a lot of you, and you just love to bring your families. That would be a whole set of economic considerations of how to do that and what the best setting is to do that, and then the courses that we'd have to design for that. But all of those are ideas. So what we want to do is what we did. Probably the single most frequent question I've gotten this week is, did you and Chris see this in 1990 when you began the Acton Institute? And my answer has been, did we see this? Did we understand we'd have a staff of how many people or a building, or certainly didn't foresee the internet or social communications in 1990? Did we see this? No, not in that sense. But when I look at this, it doesn't surprise me. This is the logical outgrowth of what our mission was right at the beginning, and it's continuing, and we are making plans for it to continue long after I'm gone.
I'm going to ask one final question, and this is a chance for you to elaborate at length. Where do you see the brightest spots of the liberty movement right now? Because if you look around the world, it's not actually that pleasant a scene right now when it comes to freedom. We see what's happening in places like China. We see ever-increasing bureaucratization of the European Union. We see populism in different forms, in different manifestations in different parts of the world, which has made Acton's life very difficult in particular parts of the world and in particular religious confessions. I mean, it's very easy to go and identify lots and lots of negatives, but where do you see the most positive signs for the future of freedom around the world today? What would you identify as being the most positive things? Besides I know you're going to say the activist people.
But I mean, what more concrete thing could I give you? I mean, look at 81 countries here, most all of whom get it, what we're saying. Most people in this room are getting what we're saying. I mean, they've stayed with us until tonight, and they're enthused. I mean, I have to make a confession. Anytime I have to go to the restroom when I'm at Acton University, I plan this 20 minutes out, Because if I go from here to there, it's going to take me 20 minutes. And what is occupying that time? It's people coming up to me enthused who want to do this. How can we bring Acton to Uganda? How can we bring it to Bolivia? How can we bring it to all these different places? And we are trying to figure out ways to do that. And if we're saying to you, well, talk to Alex Chalfant, or as I'm fond of doing, talk to Sam Gregg, it's simply because you're not the only one sitting at a fire hydrant. You know, you felt like you sat at a fire hydrant this whole week when all this information and these arguments and the data was coming at you, but we feel like we're sitting at a fire hydrant with your enthusiasm. This is the network. This is how we're going to do it. More broadly, I look at China and I see a lot of pockets of light there. Sure, the thugs are active and they're trying to protect their share, and what was happening with the I don't know if the feed really was interference on the part of the Venezuelan government or not. It was awfully coincidental, but I mean, you know, you talk to people directly because they're part of the humanity that we need to engage. I just, at dinner, I was speaking with Annette Kirk. I don't know if you know, Annette Kirk is with us tonight. She is the widow of the great Russell Kirk, about whom we've had some lectures, some courses here.
He gave his very last lecture.
He gave his very last lecture at an Acton event when we were fledgling. But what we were talking about, I said, Annette, I would just love to have an hour with Russell, given our world right now. What would he say? And I'm rephrasing what she said. But basically, I can just hear Russell, this too will pass. That is to say that there are trends that pull people in different directions. And I don't mean to quote Russell Kirk and Ludwig von Mises in the same sentence, but I will. And that is that what Mises' greatest point was, socialism doesn't work. The lie of socialism isn't that it's bad economics, it's that it's anti-economics. It's that it doesn't understand social cooperation. And what we mean by that is that at the point that Heilbrunner, one of the great Soviet historians, not that he was a Soviet, but that he was a historian of the Soviet Union and of socialism, I think it was 2 months before the collapse of communism, said that this was a durable and viable system and we had to contend with it. And it collapsed. So I think a lot of what we see in Venezuela, in China, in the United States, in other places in the world in various forms, are little men standing on stools, operating the smoke and the mirrors behind the curtain. And you and I, my friends, are Toto, who's going to pull the curtain aside and say, pay no attention to the man behind that curtain. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Father Robert Sirico. Thank you, Father.
Thank you very much.